But whenever you're talking about a controversial topic, here's the question that I think you ought to ask people. You ought to ask people, do you consider yourself a tolerant person? Because what are they going to say? They're going to say no? Of course I'm a tolerant person. So after they say that, then you say, well, good, because if I say something you don't agree with, then you'll still treat me with respect and my ideas with respect, even though you don't agree with them, right? That's what tolerance is, correct? So you've kind of, before you even started, you've already defanged any response that they might come at you with, an emotional or what we call an ad hominem attack, where they try and attack the person. So you always want to ask that question. Do you consider yourself a tolerant person? Let me ask you guys, do you consider yourself tolerant people? Let me ask the question a different way. Are Christians commanded to be tolerant? No, we are not commanded to be tolerant. What are we commanded to be? Loving. See, tolerance says hold your nose and put up with them. Love says reach out and help them. Tolerance does not go far enough for a Christian. We are supposed to love people, and that means sometimes you have to tell them what they don't want to hear. And you know this, your parents didn't tell you everything you wanted to hear. They didn't tolerate many of the things you wanted to do because they knew it was in your best interest for them to say no. So what does it mean to love? Well, one of the things it certainly means is that love stands for the truth. We must stand for the truth, even if people aren't going to like us for it. And how many times have you heard this? You heard somebody say, well, that person is such a saint. They've never said a bad word about anyone. Well, if that's the definition of a saint, Jesus was no saint. I've already just talked about it earlier today when Jesus went after the Pharisees. Sometimes you have to tell the truth. Now, you don't want to purposefully be offensive, but sometimes it's unavoidable. You're just going to speak the truth and people aren't going to like what you have to say. Now, there's probably some people in this room that aren't going to agree with me on this topic. That's fine. But I'm just going to tell you what I think the truth is on this topic. And unfortunately, in today's culture, the truth is revolutionary. George Orwell said this years ago. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Now, you may pay for telling the truth, and I've already paid, and I'll tell you why a little bit later. Not to the extent of your life, not at this point anyway. But you will pay sometimes for standing up for the truth. Now, here's what we're going to do in the 45 minutes we have. The first thing we're going to talk about is what is the same-sex marriage debate about? It's not what most of us think it's about. Secondly, what are the 4 Ps? If you remember anything from this presentation, if you remember the 4 Ps, it will help you discuss this conversation or this topic, I think, in a very easy way. If you just remember these 4 Ps, you can talk about it in an intelligent way in a short period of time. What are the stakes? What's the big deal? Who cares if we endorse same-sex marriage? What does it matter? Is it really any big deal, or should we just go ahead with it? And I don't know if we're going to get to this in this session. We may have to wait to the Q&A tonight, but answering the objections born this way, equal rights, discrimination, bigotry, all that, we'll get to it. If we don't get to it now, we'll get to it tonight in this room, all right? Let's start here at point 1. What is the same-sex marriage debate about? And before we get into that, let me ask the question, why do many heterosexuals support same-sex marriage? I think there are 3 major reasons. The first reason is intellectual. We don't understand why the state supports marriage in the first place. And we're going to unpack that here in just a minute. What is the purpose for the state endorsing marriage to begin with? We think it's one thing, but it's really not that. Secondly, there's a moral component here. We've been duped into believing that this is a civil rights issue, that it is somehow immoral to oppose same-sex marriage, that somehow you're bigoted or it's like disagreeing with the Equal Rights Amendment for different races, that kind of thing. Somehow it's immoral if you don't agree with same-sex marriage. But probably the last one is more, I think, the most prevalent one, and that is emotional. We are loving people who want our homosexual friends and relatives to be happy, so we just say that'll make them happy. Well, that's fine. Who am I? Why would I be against happiness? We are also impacted by insults and peer pressure. And this comes out in the polls all the time. That you get these grandiose polls in our country today about how same-sex marriage is really advancing and how now a majority of people agree with it, and every time it goes for a vote, it never passes. And one of the reasons for that is because people don't want to tell the pollster that they're against same-sex marriage because the pollster may think they're a bigot or a homophobe or something like that. And so it's more emotional, all right? Now, what is, well, this is, I gotta set this up right. Because a lot of the reasons that we hear for same-sex marriage in the culture are fallacious. They're fallacious, I should say. They're fallacious reasons. Born that way, discrimination, equal rights, bigotry, it's just like race. They're all fallacious. They are not really what they seem they are. And in fact, this is what Chesterton said probably 100 years ago. He said, fallacies do not cease being fallacies when they become fashions. Just about every argument you're going to hear in support of same-sex marriage has some sort of fallacy behind it, particularly in the media. All right, what is this debate about? Well, let me talk about what it's not about. It is not about any of these things I'm about to list, even though most of us think it is. It's not about equality or equal rights. It's not about discrimination against the class of people. It's not about denying homosexuals the ability to commit to one another. You know, two people, if they want to commit themselves to one another till death do them part, can already do so. Government's not preventing it. If they want to do it, they can do it. So it's not about preventing that. It's not about love or private relationships, not about tolerance or intolerance. It's not about bigotry or homophobia. It's not about sexual orientation or being born a certain way. It's not about race or the civil rights struggle. It's not about interracial marriage. It's not about heterosexuals and divorce, even though many heterosexuals have ruined marriage because of divorce. That really isn't the issue here. It's not about the often misused separation of church and state, and it's not even about religion. You say, well, what is it about? Well, actually, it's not even about marriage for most homosexuals either. What percentage of homosexuals who live in a jurisdiction that have same-sex marriage do you think get married? Any idea? 4%? Yeah, it's the last I checked, it was 4%. Even if we round it up to 10. But as data from countries with same-sex marriage show, approximately 96% of homosexuals don't get married when they're given the opportunity. And those that do get married break up at a rate much higher than heterosexuals. So this really isn't even about marriage either. Well, you say then, what is this debate about? What is it about? What is it, Tim? Yes, you could say it that way. I think one way of saying it, you had something to add to that? No? Somebody else? Yes. The name. Why do they want the name? Go ahead. Yeah.
The principle, they don't want to feel like they don't want heterosexuality regarded as superior to
Okay,
homosexuality.
good. You're all on it. Yes, what are you going to say, man? Everything to be quote-unquote fair, whatever that means. Yes, go ahead. Okay, some sort of freedom, but their freedom's already there. Go. It sounds moral. All right, you're all close to it. I think the way to say it is they want validation and normalization.